Hello and welcome to this video on advanced offer analysis. Unless you understand how to analyze an offer in combination with the scenario models that you've created, you're never really going to know which offer is the best. This video walks through step by step how you should break down an offer. We're going to talk about some core concepts in evaluating offers, and then what we're going to talk about is analyzing offers across multiple types of potential outcomes in your business. We'll talk about a detailed individual analysis, and then finally end up with a comparative analysis across multiple buyers and offers. Okay, the first thing, here's a few core concepts. Before you start getting offers, it's really good to have a framework for how to evaluate them side by side. Otherwise, the process can become very time-consuming and very confusing. The first thing I recommend is that you do a detailed individual analysis first, and you analyze the offer across all of your scenarios, and then we'll create what's called a weighted average scenario, which is essentially a probability-based analysis of your offer. Second, we'll talk about the concept of buyer synergies. It's very unlikely that your offer or your economics in the future would be the same across all buyers, because some of them, for example, might want to expand to Europe, where other ones might not have the capability to. Some of them may want to go omni-channel. Some of them may want to stay just, for example, on Amazon. The point being is that you need to make some levels of assumptions about what synergies exist between you and the buyer in order to properly analyze their offer. And that doesn't mean that always the synergies are going to be positives. There might be drawbacks or risks that things go worse than they are today as well. The next item up is qualitative factors. Things like trust, likelihood of getting a deal done, complexity of due diligence, and how much the buyer really is interested in your business all have a critical factor in terms of which offer you should select. You want to match your offers against your priorities. So, whether or not you have a high risk and willing to go after a higher reward, or if you'd rather just get guaranteed money off the table, all of these are factors in how you evaluate an offer. And then finally, once we've done the individual analysis, we're going to show you how you want to comparatively model all of the bids together so that you can see them side by side. Okay. Here's where I say the scenario analysis that you've been building gets real. You want to validate again and again all of the different potential forecasts for your business as you go through a transaction. If you remember, we've talked about a strategic finance option of creating what's called your base case. This is your most likely scenario, and you want to have it be at least 80% accurate, in terms of 80% likelihood that you're going to hit these numbers or exceed them. You also have your worst case scenario, which is a more conservative assessment, which is what I call your take it to the bank number, the number that you say more than 90% likelihood is going to happen. And finally, you have a growth rate on an assumption of what's called a best case scenario, which you don't want to be completely quote unquote pie in the sky, but you do want it to be something 70% or better. And the point is that now when we lay these scenarios across a valuation of your business, what you're going to find is you're going to start looking at these numbers in an entirely new light. And if you were interested in them before, you're going to be really interested in them now because they have the potential to affect your valuation by hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars. The second part, once you've looked at your scenarios and really analyzed them, you're going to want to take a look at your individual offer, and you're going to want to offer the structure of the offer and the level of engagement. The first thing we always say is, what lane is this buyer? And as you can see here, we're modeling out somebody that's doing a majority equity transaction. What's the time period of their financials? Interestingly enough, different buyers may look at different time periods, where one buyer may say, I can only look at your trailing 12 months, but another buyer may say, I'll be looking at future 6 months and trailing 12 months. So you want to be able to compare those. Is your offer based on revenue? Is it based on contribution margin? Or is it based on EBITDA or seller's discretionary earnings? And then finally, it is good to know what the headline multiple is that I call it. So if I take the $1 million of the EBITDA, I multiply it times the 4, the enterprise value of this offer is $4 million. But as you'll see as we go through the analysis, most people put too much focus on the headline of the enterprise value number and don't look at all of the details. And we're going to fix that as we go through our offer analysis. The next thing to look at is the target closing date for the particular buyer. In other words, how fast can this buyer close? This generally tells you a lot about their level of interest and excitement in the deal. And the theory to think on is that somebody willing to close faster generally is more engaged than somebody that is willing to close slower. But you have to be careful of buyers that say that they can close quickly but can't deliver. The other thing you want to take a look at is how much work went into their offer. As you can see in this worksheet, is it a simple IOI, indication of interest? Was it just a terms email, or was it a fully thought out letter of intent? You also want to take a look at what's the anticipated amount of due diligence complexity that they're going to put you through, because depending on your business, that may or may not affect whether or not you think they're likely to close. And then finally, you want to rank this offer compared to other ones based on total consideration that you would expect to receive on the deal, and then also guaranteed compensation, or what we call sometimes cash at closing. The next step is to take a look at this offer across multiple scenarios in your business. So as you can see here, the guaranteed amounts in this offer are the same. Whether your business is worst case, base case, or best case, what you're going to find is that they offered you a $1.5 million deal upon migration and another $500,000 in holdbacks and seller financing. That doesn't change across the scenarios. The next thing that you want to take a look at is what happens in the stabilization, which is essentially your business remaining the same, or maybe at least 90% of the current level. And as you can see in this fictitious scenario, that is also the same across all of the options. Where things start getting different is that in the worst case scenario, where you're not growing that much, you in this offer are missing out on the earnout, but in the base and the best case scenarios, you are not. The individual rolled equity, as you can see, is ranging in the value that it returns from just getting your money back in the worst case scenario to 4 or 5 times, depending on the growth rate of your business. This is a very key thing to analyze if you're looking at any type of retained or rolled equity transaction. And then in this particular example, we've actually granted Topco equity, and you're taking a look at what the return is on that side of things as well, which is ranged from 20% to 125% net return. You'll also notice that the balance sheet adjustments are the same across all of the scenarios. And then finally, take a look at that number down in the corner there, 5.16, which is the weighted average analysis across all of your scenarios. In essence, what you do is you go through and you say, how likely is my worst case? How likely is my base case? And how likely is my best case across all payment types? You add all of that together and you notice that the weighted average offer of this particular scenario is 5.16. Which, interestingly enough, when you compare that against the worst case of 4.25 or the base of 6.92 or 8.8, you'll notice that it's much closer to the worst cases than the best cases. Now, I don't want everybody to think that there's an 8.8x multiple out there for you just because we listed it in this sheet. What I wanted to do was list out a very different base and best case multiple from worst case, but then start to realize that even though the headline of that might look good, you have to use your probability analysis to really say, what likelihood do I have of ever achieving that particular multiple? And one of the things that you'll notice when people start getting in offers is you get what I call sometimes an analysis paralysis, where what you're doing is you don't really know because the offer looks good, but you don't have an ability to know how likely you are to achieve it. And the weighted average analysis method helps you get rid of that bottleneck. Okay. After you've done that, you want to start graphing out, and as you can see here, here's the earnings that I might have over time across the different scenarios. And then if you like to convert it to a multiple, here's the multiple that I have, both the non-contingent guaranteed and then the projected contingent on top of that. So I can see in this scenario, I'm at a 4.25 in my worst case, maybe a 5.25 in my base case, and maybe a 7.75 in my best case scenario. This type of analysis helps you see visually the amount of risk that you're taking, but also what the amount of potential is. And oftentimes you'll hear people say, well, you should just go for as much cash at closing as possible. And while that's true, they probably don't fail to tell you is that some buyers, for example, in this scenario, they can only go to a 4x guaranteed multiple by their investment committee and their lenders. So if you really like this buyer and you believe in their synergies, you simply have no way to move the guaranteed amounts. You need to decide, is it better to just have the guaranteed amounts, or is it better to still negotiate the other levers in the transaction? And I'm not saying you should take a deal with an earnout or rolled equity or not. What I am saying is that if you don't analyze and negotiate to try and receive those, you probably are leaving dollars on the table and you're searching for the simple answer rather than the most valuable one. Okay, after you've done the economic analysis, you want to analyze what I call, what is the story behind the numbers? And as you can see here, there's sort of three different areas. One of them is what we call the buyer discussion notes. And it's essentially, what is the buyer telling us directly with their offer? And then what are they indirectly telling us with their questions? If you reach a buyer and they're asking a lot of detailed questions about your ad backs and about, $5,000 here and $10,000 there, that might be signaling to you, for example, that you have a very financially oriented buyer, versus buyer two that might be talking about how much more money can they put into this business and how fast can you release products. Those are very different types of buyers. And that helps you understand a little bit of how likely are they to close. A lot of buyers may talk a good game, but how good are they going to be when it gets to the closing finish line, and how likely are you to get a deal done with them? The next one is, what is your advisor, whether it's Northbound or some other advisor, what is the analysis that they're providing? And then what you want to do is you want to factor that in and provide back your feelings and your ultimate ranking and decision regarding this particular buyer. The final step is step 5, and this is where it gets kind of fun. You start creating a common analysis of the buyers across one sheet of paper so that you can see them side by side. So, as you can see here in some of the key points, we have two different buyers. We've got a majority equity buyer and a cash plus earnout buyer. But if you notice, we've actually got 3 offers because we've loaded in the counter offer for buyer number 2. Do you see where it says buyer 2 Inc. is the same, but one of them is a 5x offer and one of them is a 5.5x offer because we've countered back to them. We've ranked them on the guaranteed amount and then also the total rank. So as you can see, offer number 1 has the highest total rank, but offer number 1 is also the lowest rank if you're ranking by non-contingent or if you're ranking by guaranteed payments. One of the things that's the same in this metric is the same $1 million of earnings is being used. But many times with different ad backs and or different structures, you'll have one buyer that's using an offer on EBITDA, whereas another one is doing an offer on seller's discretionary earnings. And it's critical for you, and the reason why we have this comparative analysis is to understand that one of them might have a lower multiple, but it might be a lower multiple on a higher number because of the way that they're calculating your business. One of them, if you notice, has the least value in the worst case scenario, but what happens is that they become the best case in the other scenarios. So what we did in this scenario is we said, let's renegotiate offer number 2 to have it be closer to buyer number 1. And the goal when you have the second offer is to create a tough decision of whether or not you should go for the higher multiple or not. Again, in this fictitious analysis, what we did is we looked at the different offers, and as you can see from a weighted analysis perspective, the total offer value of each one of these is $5.1 million for the first scenario, which as you can see is a 5.16 multiple. We were able to counter back on buyer 2 to get to a 4.8 multiple. And the point is that you take a look at these offers and say, you know what, in exchange for getting an extra $1 million of guaranteed money, it's not worth bearing the risk, which allows you to, as you can see, circle in green, an eyes wide open exit for offer number 3. These are the detailed steps that you want to go through when you're analyzing your offers. Okay, let's offer some closing thoughts. First of all, you need to study the terms in this video to really understand each of the different ways and understand the language of offers. Then you need to think about the different lanes and multiple buyers per lane in order to understand how to maximize your value. You want to shift from just the headline multiple of TTM to an advanced analysis that looks at what I call multiple multiples, your guaranteed multiple or non-contingent multiple, and your lifetime effective multiple, which is the lifetime of all your payments in the deal. I think the best way to do this is to actually, quote unquote, see your deal in action and actually fill out an offer sheet like this so that you can see each month how your valuation and how your deal is changing. And if you want to get a premium valuation, you have to start thinking of shifting from one payment event to events. You have to go back to your forecasting and remembering that every deal that you do is dependent on how your business is going to be doing going forward. I like to say that the guaranteed part of your deal is the meal. You don't want to be taking earnouts that if you don't hit them, you'd be dissatisfied. Now you might be a little bit disheartened, but the contingent is where you may be able to eat a good dessert along with your meal. And what you hopefully get to see in going through this offer analysis is that buyer capabilities matter. And when I say they matter, I mean they really matter, because the fact of the situations is going to be you'll likely have hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars out there in potential earnouts or rolled equity. And depending on the capabilities of you plus your buyer, that's going to make the difference of whether or not you hit them or not. The final principles I'll say is this. It's absolutely critical that you don't, quote unquote, pick the right buyer until you analyze all buyers against all deal components. Otherwise, what you're literally doing is costing yourself money by looking at part of the scenario, but not the complete picture. So set your goals, calculate what you need to do and reach them, and then manage your time allocation for each business opportunity that you have. And you do that in your offer analysis so that you can start to look at which business opportunity is the best one going forward. Thank you very much.